Hello there. The subject I'm talking about today is something that affects every single human alive: money. You may be saying to yourself, Mr. Talking Head, surely the uncontacted tribe on Sentinelese Island doesn't have money. Firstly, you don't know that. If you go there to ask, they'll kill you. Secondly, money is just a lubricant for trade. It can be paper, bottle caps, shells, rice, gold, bricks of tea, or even giant limestone discs weighing thousands of pounds. When it comes to determining what a currency should be, gold is, well, the gold standard. It's relatively rare, so you can be sure large destabilizing amounts won't devalue your stockpile, and it doesn't tarnish with age, so you can be assured that the gold sitting in your safe won't disintegrate over time. The actual form money takes, however, is irrelevant. The crucial component of currency is trust. Trust that it will be accepted in exchange for goods or services in the future. Debt is similar, and that it is also based on trust. Trust that the lender has that the borrower will pay what is promised at a future date. Debt is an even older form of trust than currency. A farmer's crops are seasonal. They may buy something with the promise of a part of their harvest in the future. That is a debt-based transaction. So while it is possible that the Sentinelese don't have a form of physical currency, they certainly have debts towards each other. Currency is just something that a society trusts that the vast majority of people within the system will accept for goods or services. The currency itself is almost meaningless. That's why nowadays it's mostly just a bunch of zeros and ones in a computer, and was mostly just paper before that. Before currency, we had a barter and debt system. One party would have apples for sale and another hammers. The apple farmer needs a hammer to make a ladder, and the blacksmith loves apples, so they make a trade. Whatever amount they come up with is up to the people trading, the time of year, and the rarity of the items. What happens then if the blacksmith hates apples? How does the apple farmer get a hammer? He can either try to convince the blacksmith that the apples are popular, and that he'll be able to trade them for something of equal value later down the road. In that case, the blacksmith is then taking on a large amount of risk, because now he has to find a buyer for a perishable item, which means he's going to demand more apples than he normally would have charged. On the other hand, the apple farmer could trade the apples to a barber in town for a voucher. He can then trade that voucher to the blacksmith for a hammer. Now it's winter. The apple farmer needs clothes for his family. He's all out of apples because of the season, but his family might die if they don't get the new clothes for the winter. He goes to the tailor and asks them if they'll accept apples from next year's harvest in return for clothes now. That's a lot of risk for the tailor. What if the apple farmer skips town? What if he has made a similar deal with others and he can't pay everybody? What if he dies before the harvest? He asks for way more apples than the clothes are worth, and the apple farmer is in a tough spot and must accept whatever the tailor comes up with. Otherwise, his family might be in danger. Now imagine that hassle for everything you've ever wanted to buy. Suppose then, gold is introduced into the system. As I've said, it won't disappear over time, it's hard to find, and it's hard to fake. If the apple farmer sells a bunch of apples to people that like them, now he can trade the gold they gave him for things that people that don't like apples sell. He can also make all of his money in a couple of months, and then have that money saved for a time when the crops aren't available. Money allows people to trade goods without having to micromanage every aspect of their lives. Currency is a function of trust, but it represents the labor, skill, attention, and time of the individual that holds it. If you make nails, and you accept 1 gold piece for 10 buckets of nails, you are saying that the time and resources it took to make those nails is worth that 1 gold piece. And you are judging that 1 gold piece would be equivalent to the amount of time and resource gathering as someone making, say, 5 outfits. However, that gold could also be 3 outfits and 2 pigs, or could be 1 pig and a cow, or could be a rare piece of jewelry. Currency is similar to a battery in that you store your labor and resources that you produce in it to access at a later state for the labor and resources of others. It is, in essence, a measurement of life. Currency has the power to turn into anything that you desire at any time. Since the currency could be anything, it's inherently worth nothing, but what it represents is worth everything. Now that we have a fairly basic understanding of what money is, let's move on to trade. Before the current system, the world operated under a system called mercantilism. It was one of the earliest economic theories for understanding how countries should approach trading with each other. The idea was that the more things you sold to another country, the more currency you would receive, and the wealthier your country would become. So a trade deficit, buying more than selling, would mean that your country is becoming weaker, and a surplus, selling more than buying, would mean you're gaining strength. It also focuses heavily on keeping production in your own country and ensuring self-sufficiency. It's an incredibly hostile system. There's always a winner and a loser in every transaction. Whichever side is making more currency than the other is winning, because your country is getting wealthier and the other country is getting poorer. Because of this attitude, the relationship with your trading partners is always going to be antagonistic, as both sides will constantly try to outdo each other to get the upper hand in the deal. Tariffs are a mercantilist's best friend. They are a tool that allows the government to control the flow of goods by implementing a tax paid by the importer of the goods. They allow you to constrict the flow of certain goods by making them too expensive. People don't buy them, and due to a lack of sales, they will naturally stop being imported into the country. Countries will impose tariffs for a variety of reasons. It could be to increase domestic production. Now that getting furs from other countries are too expensive, the local fur sellers will have an increased demand for their furs. Maybe you made a deal with one country that you would buy more furs from them. You can't just ask merchants to buy from a specific country, but if you increase the tax of furs from all the other countries, then they will naturally start to buy furs from the country with the lowest tax. Tariffs are a tool of economic warfare. They can be used tactically to shut off an opposing country's vital revenue streams, kill foreign manufacturing, and cripple economies. They have their protectionist uses, and some things absolutely should be protected by them. But make no mistake, they are hostile in nature. There are ways to outmaneuver tariffs. A country could try to sneak their products in, or they could ship their products to a third country with a lower import tariff than theirs, and then import from that country. By their very nature, tariffs will increase the price of all goods that they target. The reason people are importing goods from other countries is either because they can't get them in their own country, or it's cheaper than the goods in their own country. If you put a tariff on a good, the price will increase. Because importers have to pay more to import it, they will inevitably increase their price to maintain a similar profit as before the tariff. The increased price means that less people will buy the product on the whole, and that local goods will be perceived as cheaper. People will start to buy more domestic products, and the local producer will start running out of stock. Now they have two choices: expand so that they can produce enough to match the new demand, which they may not even be able to do, or increase the price so that they can make as much money with the stock that they are able to produce. Now the government is either forcing artificial growth or a general increase in the price of goods. If the local producer decides that it can increase production and expands, they are now at a huge risk, because if the tariffs ever go away, the cheaper goods will start to flow back into the country, and the goods that they are making will start to sell at the pre-tariff rate. Now they have spent all that time and money to expand, and all that is wasted because the government simply changed its mind. Countries will do whatever it takes to get their goods into foreign economies. They want access to more people. That increase in potential buyers means more money for their people and more taxes for them. If there are people willing to buy a product, merchants will find a way to get it to them. Trying to get in the way of that supply and demand dynamic is an incredible waste of time. Mercantilism is antiquated, and it has many drawbacks. It is a win-lose system. It can create hostility towards otherwise friendly nations. It stifles economic growth, and it is incredibly inefficient. In 1776, a Scotsman changed the world. Adam Smith was an economist and philosopher who is widely considered the father of modern economics. The year the United States was founded, he released a book called The Wealth of Nations. In it, he talks about the division of labor, the origins of money, the difference between labor value and money price, the components that make up price, labor bargaining, why things are a different value, rent, stock, the expeditious use of capital by governments, how wealth accumulates, the problems with mercantilism, how trade should be handled between governments. He introduces the concept of the invisible hand that guides markets, argues for as little government intervention as possible, the role the government should play, how they should be funded, and debt. This book essentially eradicated mercantilism. Smith argued that it was not the accumulation of gold and land that produced value, it was productive labor. Converting things into other things, skills and time applied to resources, that is what creates value. As discussed, gold itself is just a metal that was dug out of the ground. It has no inherent value. The value is the trust that it will be able to be used in the future to acquire other people's labor. Every product has two prices, the natural price and the market price. The natural price is made up of the cost of labor, the rent of the land the product is produced on, stock, the tools and material used to create the product, and profit. All components of natural price are subject to change depending on the market. Labor could become less expensive if there's a surplus of workers. The rent could become more expensive if resources are discovered on the same land, or the area around it becomes more valuable. As new technologies emerge, more efficient tools or cheaper resources could decrease the cost of stock. But out of all of the components of natural price, it is the profit that is the quickest and most frequent to change. Profit is any amount paid over the cost of production. Profit can go into the pockets of the owners, it can go into expanding the business, it can go into an insurance fund in case of market downturn, paying healthcare for the workers, or increasing worker pay. But as we all know, the office pizza party is the best use of profits. Market price is what the product is priced at the point of sale. It is the goal of the producer to get the highest market price, while it is the goal of the consumer to get the lowest market price. What determines the market price is the supply and demand of the item. If the company sells out of their stock in an hour, they will have two options. They can increase production to manufacture enough of the product to sell that amount sold in 1 hour for every hour they're open, which would require drastic capital expenditure. Or they can simply increase the price per item so that what they already produce lasts the whole day. Both decisions will increase the amount of money coming in, but one requires a complete redesign of the business, and the other requires just a sticker. Most businesses just increase the price. Some will increase production if it's possible to do so without too much hassle, and some still will do a little of both. The net result is typically the increase in price for the targeted item. The optimal market price is the knife's edge between the lowest price a merchant is willing to sell an item and the highest price a consumer is willing to pay. Supply is the quantity of goods, demand is the amount of consumers willing to buy. Both are needed for an economy to function. You may have the only rock in the world that looks as it does, but if no one cares, there's no demand. Just as consumers would be willing to pay any amount of money for a pill that would give them eternal life and happiness, the demand is there, but no one can supply it. Perception of a product can be altered to increase or decrease demand. If you can associate a product with a good or a bad thing, people will buy more or less of it. Marketing is the business of altering people's perception. Products coming into and out of fashion are almost entirely due to marketing. It's a black art, able to drastically increase demand or destroy entire companies overnight. There are also deceptive ways to increase demand. Products can be made artificially scarce, as is the case with diamonds. The skills to make the item could be lied about, or the materials it's made out of faked. Those tactics decrease the natural price while attempting to match the market price of the real item, or increase the market price by manufacturing fake limited supply. The things that can have an effect on natural price are the skill of the laborer, the change of the cost of stock, and the land that you operate on becoming more or less expensive. A laborer that has a specialty is able to do a smaller variety of things, but what they can do, they do very well. If you have an unskilled labor force, they generally take the same amount of time to accomplish any part of the work that they are doing. A specialist, however, can produce more per hour of a specific thing than a non-specialist. There are, for instance, 18 steps to make a pin. If one person wanted to make a pin, they would have to walk between workstations, set up the equipment, and accomplish the work. They also wouldn't necessarily have the skill to accomplish each step on the first go, as they have to do every step and wouldn't have the repetition to develop the skill that a skilled laborer has. 10 people making pins in this way would slow production, as they would need to wait for equipment to become available, and some would inevitably be faster at certain steps than others. They would maybe make 20 or 30 pins a day. If each person stays at a station, however, and only accomplishes a couple of steps, they don't need to take the time to set up besides when they start, they don't need to waste time walking around, and they will eventually become faster at the actions that they need to perform. Those same 10 people may produce thousands of pins in a single day. This is the power of dividing labor between a skilled workforce. That increase in production will decrease the natural price and eventually the market price. Specialized workers will also gain new insights that a general workforce wouldn't. They may be able to create new tools or technology to make the job even more efficient. A skilled workforce means increased efficiency and decreased prices for everyone that has access to them. The invisible hand is by far the most famous idea from The Wealth of Nations. It is the concept that everyone operating in their own self-interest to seek profit, a job, or buy goods cheaply is being led by the invisible hand that leads to a more prosperous and beneficial society. As long as the yin and yang of supply and demand are able to operate unfettered, it will naturally ensure the best outcome for the most people. A baker does not bake bread out of kindness. He may enjoy the work, but he does it so that he may make a living. To attract customers, he must bake good bread and sell it at a reasonable cost. To accomplish this, he must be diligent in how he manages his resources and make bread people actually want. This means resources are, naturally, not being wasted, so more people that need them will have access to them. Since it makes no sense for a baker to have more flour than he can use, the flour that he doesn't buy will be able to be bought by other bakers. The result is good, affordable bread and resources that don't need central planning. No one needs to tell the flour mill to sell their flour to specific people. The bakers will seek it out themselves. This is a self-regulating system. At scale, however, there are places where regulation is warranted. A government should protect property rights. If it doesn't, then there would be a cooling effect on innovation and growth, as there would be no point in becoming successful if it's just going to be stolen without punishment later on. It should provide a national defense to ensure that no single group gains too much power or influence, establish laws and regulations to protect the general interest of the citizens, build infrastructure, roads, and bridges. Good infrastructure keeps the population happy, and it increases the speed and decreases the cost of transporting goods, which means a decrease in the general price of goods. Ensure education, which would help create a larger population of skilled workers, protect the morality of the citizens, bust up monopolies, and keep markets as open as possible. It is the responsibility of the government to be the guardrails for the market and its citizens, but to allow them to operate as freely as possible without letting them cause harm or stifle the invisible hand. Regulations are necessary, but they should have a limited scope that protects the people and businesses from bad practices that could cause physical or monetary harm. Free trade is letting the market sort itself out with as little intervention from the government as possible. It is about pure efficiency. Every country has their own advantages that affect natural price. This is entirely up to geography. What natural resources are in the land, ease of access to them, where the country itself is located, and how difficult transportation across the country is, will all have an effect on what the country can produce. The specific raw resources each country has access to will determine what kind of work people will become specialized in. Ease of access is also an important factor in production. A country may have a large supply of raw resources, but if mining it and bringing it to the manufacturing hub is all more expensive than getting it imported from another country, then it will naturally be imported. Large sources of easily transportable resources will create a specialized workforce that can more efficiently work with that material. Over time, those specializations will create new technologies and new advancements in manufacturing. From there, more complex specialties will arise. Each country's economy will automatically specialize in what it is the most efficient at producing. The free market demands efficiency, decreased prices, and is self-regulating, provided that all components in it are able to act in their own self-interest. As Smith conceded, regulation is necessary in certain instances. The market can't solve for everything. There are certain things that do not generate a profit that are needed. There will always be people lying about their products, trying to get rid of waste in destructive ways, producing things that are harmful to society, and stealing ideas before they can be monetized by their inventors, which stifles creativity. On the whole, however, the market will take care of itself. Free trade brings the world closer. It destroys barriers and creates healthier and more prosperous populations. Countries are much less likely to fight if they are making money together. It solves the export-import hostility of mercantilism. Smith argues that focusing on import-export balances is a fool's errand. A trade deficit isn't a bad thing. If you go to a store and you buy a cookie, you now have a trade deficit with that store. Has that store taken advantage of you? Has that store won the transaction? Or have you simply purchased something at a fair market value and you now get to enjoy a delightfully baked good? You then get to use that cookie as fuel to produce goods and services that will generate you more wealth. A country does not become wealthy because of the amount of gold it has on hand. It's wealthy because the people within it can take any amount of capital and increase its value through their labor. A country can have a deficit with another indefinitely and still be more wealthy. Even though the capital is flowing out, the rate of production is higher than the deficit. The only danger is if debt is being used to make purchases. It can be used responsibly without issue, but there is an unlimited potential debt. You can borrow more than you could ever possibly pay back. It would be irresponsible for both the borrower and the lender to put themselves in that position, but it is possible. It's actually more likely that a wealthy nation is going to have a trade deficit. If a country has a larger, wealthy population, they are naturally going to have more money to buy products from other countries that have lower disposable incomes. They did not become more wealthy by selling to those other countries. They became wealthy by being more efficient with resources having a larger specialized workforce, and being the center of technological advancement. All of these things could happen without ever selling anything to another country. Think of it this way. If you have two businesses making the same exact product in two countries, but one is more efficient, they can produce more at a cheaper price. Say then that the more efficient company has bought all of the resources their country has to make that product. They then begin importing that resource from another country that has a less efficient producer. The country with the more efficient producer now has a deficit with the country with a less effective producer. Yet the more efficient producer is making way more money than the less efficient one. No one in their right mind would suggest that the country with the less efficient producer is better off in that situation. Free trade has the tendency to bring countries closer together. When goods and inevitably people flow from place to place, they increase exposure to each other. So long as the cultures are similar enough, increased exposure decreases tensions and increases appreciation. It increases the spread of ideas and efficiency. Now, instead of one country's worth of specialized labor and resources, there are two. The flow of ideas, technologies, and capital will naturally find the best use, as it had when both markets were cut off from each other. Both countries will become more wealthy and more productive as a result of being more open. The downside is that flow will inevitably lead to people losing their jobs due to redundancy, a more efficient or a cheaper workforce in another market. The people that lose their jobs are then forced to find something else to produce. That is the cost for efficiency, cheaper goods, and new technologies. Those that find themselves in the position of losing a job should be cared for through government programs that will set them up to specialize in new emerging technologies and production. It is through no fault of the worker that their labor is more efficiently done somewhere else, and it would benefit the country to get them back into production as soon as possible. If we are willing to accept the incredible benefits of free trade, then we must be able to take care of those that it doesn't account for. It is in everybody's best interest to take care of workers that lose their jobs. Education and providing temporary pay assistance are the best ways to support people in this situation. Artificially trying to control where labor is done is a waste of time. Eventually, those jobs will move, and you are keeping people in jobs that aren't actually productive. The workers will be better off after transitioning to a new job that actually produces wealth. They will be paid better wages, and they will have better job security. A rising tide lifts all boats. Free trade is the best economic system ever devised. It is why you have a supercomputer in your pocket, why you can dine on salmon caught in Spain with a side of Peruvian potatoes and Chinese asparagus, all while washing it down with a wine from Argentina. 150 years ago, you would have to be a king for such a feast. Now it is just a meal on any old Tuesday. Look at how far everything has come since the Industrial Revolution. Indoor plumbing, cars, electricity, lights, internet, TVs, air conditioners, refrigerators, comfortable clothing, and bedding. The average American has more amenities than any royalty before 1776. No other system can even hold a candle to the amount of growth, prosperity, lives saved, and technological advancements as free trade.